The US is about to ban TikTok. Or is it? Now, listen, guys, it's been a while since I've shot a YouTube video. I've frankly just been really busy, but I felt the need to shoot this video because there's a lot of conversation happening around TikTok. Unless you've been living under a rock, a lot of states in the United States have been putting a ban on TikTok for government devices. And then this just happened literally an hour and a half, few hours ago. Senator Josh Hawley just tweeted this over here, basically saying tonight the Senate unanimously passed my bill to ban TikTok on all government devices. So this has become a very big conversation. Obviously, it's blowing up on Twitter. Everyone's got an opinion on it, and a lot of people seem to be, in my opinion, kind of getting ahead of themselves, kind of jumping the gun, which is expected, right? When something big happens, everyone wants to make predictions. Everyone wants to be on the right side of the prediction. Everyone wants to be the person to break something. Everyone wants to this is a great topic to get lots of views. Obviously, I'm shooting a video on it. And as somebody that's been a big advertiser on the platform, as somebody that's been kind of critical of big tech across the board for many, many years, I figured, hey, let me shoot a video and let me share my opinion on it, and specifically 3 reasons why I think it is highly unlikely that this goes really any further beyond kind of state and federal government putting bans on like government officials, where like spying actually can have a really big impact on our national security. So for anybody that's kind of watching this and they're not really sure, like, well, why are they even talking about banning TikTok? What's the big deal? To share some context here. So TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is a very, very, very large Chinese company, Chinese tech company. And there's been a lot of revelations recently, especially from like NSA, FBI, a lot of our intelligence agencies saying that TikTok, essentially the app on our phones, is really just like a Trojan horse, that there's a lot of things built into the back of it, even though it's operating in the United States, that is basically extracting lots and lots of very, very accurate and personal data on all Americans, and that the Chinese government is using that to their advantage. So that's one big argument for and reasoning justification for banning this, which I think that's a valid argument. It's a valid concern. Number 2 is that it's kind of just toxic for our children and toxic for our youth, which of course also has merit. TikTok is the most addictive app by far. Of course, the Chinese version, Douyin, looks very different than our TikTok. Basically, they have the kind of the Diet Coke version. We have like full Coke, and not just like Coca-Cola, like cocaine. Like it's very different. Like the Chinese version, they only let kids use it for a certain period of time. They work in videos on engineering, math, science. They cut it off certain times of the day. So they know like this is bad for kids and we need to like put rules in place. We could do the same thing with our version, but we just don't do it, right? So that's one thing. And then also like the bigger thing with that argument, why I think the first one's more justifiable than this one, is that's a slippery slope to basically just single out TikTok as being bad for kids and not singling out Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Snap, basically any social media app, going to Twitch, video games. Like it's at the end of the day, like none of this is good, right? None of this, like having kids on any of these apps for long periods of time is not good. It's not good for their mental health. It's not good for their social skills. It's not good for their confidence. It's not good for their ego. It's like, it's for 100 reasons, 100,000 reasons, it's bad. But again, like singling TikTok out specifically is the only one that's bad. I think that's kind of like a BS argument. So I'm going to kind of throw that argument over here because I don't think that that's the one that really would merit something of this scale and size. Because this would be a big thing that would happen if the US actually did ban one of the biggest apps in the world, and definitely one of the biggest apps and companies in the country from operating. Again, the whole spying thing, totally legit. Like I think that is a very, very valid concern at a national security level. If we're basically, the Chinese government's built this Trojan horse into our entire population where they can just pull and learn everything they need to learn, and kind of drive action and drive how we think and what we do through trends and stuff. Like that's a very valid concern. And so, you can have multiple beliefs here. Like as a human being, as a parent, as just a person, like, yeah, I think, TikTok is not great for us. I think a lot of social media is not great for us. I think just at a high level, social media is bad for all of us. And I don't think kids should be on it. I don't think even teens should really be on it till a certain age. So again, that one, I get it. And I think that's valid. And I think getting rid of it in our military, getting rid of it at our government level, that is a totally good move, in my opinion. I think that's a smart move. Now, the one thing about this, like that I think is interesting, is this seems more just like virtue signaling at this point and not really a story. So this coming out now, like from what I've heard at least, and again, I'm not an expert here, but from what I've heard from talking to people that are in government that I know and just seeing some of the comments on this, it seems like this has already been a thing. That if you work in Congress, or you work in the executive branch, or you work in the judicial branch, or you work at high levels of government, that you have your government phone, and those phones don't have any social media apps on it, and they're very controlled and encrypted and all that stuff. So it seems like this kind of already was a thing that was already in place, and this doesn't really add anything to it. So I don't think it's really a big story. I think it's more so just like a PR thing. All these politicians want to get behind it because it's popular opinion, and they want to have a win, right? That they can kind of share. They also want to kind of divert attention from inflation, from recession, all that stuff. So that's what I think about that. Now let's dive into specifically 3 reasons why I think. Again, do I think this is impossible? No, I don't think it's a 0% chance. Do I think it's highly unlikely? Yes. And so the 3 reasons why I think it's highly unlikely, we'll start number 1. Number 1 is just the way our government works, right? Our government was created by our founding fathers in such a way, with the 3 branches, and specifically the congressional and executive branch, like the legislative and executive branch, to have conflict, to take a long time to do things, to make it difficult to get things done. Gridlock was built into it. So that way you don't have one dictator come in and just can do whatever they want, right? So it takes a long time to draft legislation. It takes a long time to get sponsors for legislation. It takes a long time to round up the votes for legislation. It takes a long time then, once something gets presented, to then get voted on. It has to go through both chambers, and it has to go to the president's desk, and they can veto it. Like, there's so much stuff that needs to happen, from idea, like plan, like ban TikTok for the United States, to actually turning that into workable legislation people get behind, that doesn't get all kinds of stuff, side projects thrown into it that derails the whole thing, right? Which is what usually happens. And so again, like at a high level, let's ban TikTok nationwide. That might sound good. It's a good one-liner, but how do you execute that, right? What are the means at like a federal level of how you can implement that, right? Are you forcing Apple, a private company, to remove another private company? How are you going to prevent people from using VPNs? How are you going to prevent people from backdooring into Google devices? Like there's so many scenarios. I don't know how you legislate this. I don't know how you enforce this. It's very tricky. So that's number 1, is I think just the nature of our government. It's very, very hard to do things like this. And I don't think there's ever been anything like this done, at least at this scale, in history. So there's no precedent. Number 2, this is a big one. Think about who loves TikTok the most. Who makes up most of TikTok's user base? It's millennials, Gen Z. It's basically sub 35. And particularly, it's, 16 to 25, right? And even young and 16. If you are a politician, whatever you believe, whether you're Republican, Democrat, down the middle, like if you're independent, whatever it is, we can all agree, I think, on one thing, that our government officials do not care about us, right? Their primary driver, their primary goal, most of them, some are good, but most, is getting reelected. That's their primary goal, is how do I stay in office? How do I win the next election and the next election? So I can spend 40 years in here, accrue massive wealth, and then leave and leverage all my influence to then get speaking gigs and consulting gigs. That's most politicians. That's their plan. And so they might say things when they can just say them, when they don't need to act on them because it sounds good. But when it comes to taking action, they have all these politicians, senators, House members, representatives, presidents, all that stuff. They have teams of strategists that are running scenarios, that are doing surveys. And so if you think about people that are probably most bothered by this, it's people probably over the age of 35, people that value privacy, people that are concerned about national security, people that care about a lot of the stuff, that maybe aren't as big of fans of social media. The problem, though, is that like a 65-year-old, doing something for them doesn't really matter, because a 65-year-old has had decades and decades and decades to get further entrenched in their political and social and economic viewpoints. And so getting them to flip-flop, to getting a 65-year-old that's voted Republican for 40 years to change their vote to Democrat, really hard to do. So what all politicians do is they try to get the first-time voters. How do I get the 18-year-old? How do I get the 16-year-old? How do I get the 21-year-old to become a Democrat, become a Republican, to vote for me in the next election? That's the prize. And so again, this is just an opinion. I just do not think it's going to be a smart idea. I think at the end of the day, people are going to sit down with a strategist and think, okay, these 20-year-olds don't really care about any of this, right? Maybe some do, but I think at a mass level, they don't care about the privacy. They don't care about all these things. They don't care about national security. A lot of them, like, they value like their things. They grew up with technology. They grew up with the internet. They grew up with social media. They don't want to lose the thing they spend 4 hours, 5 hours a day on. If this is how they interact with friends, this is how they consume content, like, you're going to tell me that you're going to remove that from their device and that you're expecting them to vote for you and not that be a big issue for them. So I think at the end of the day, as we get closer to the next election cycle, like, that's going to be a hard decision to make, right? Is saying, like, I'm willing to piss off the next big voting block for me, the future of my voting block, for what could be in the greater good. Like, it could be the right thing, but like, at the end of the day, we all know politicians act in their own self-interest. They don't do the right thing. They might say something because it sounds good when they're campaigning, but they never actually do it, right? They want to get the union on their side. They want to get the bankers on their side. They want to get the environmentalists on their side. They want to get all the teachers, like, but at the end of the day, they don't do much for these people, right? They say these things to get their support and they don't do anything. So I think lack of action is another part of it. That's kind of a 1.5. So there's 1.5, 2. Okay. And then let's wrap number 3 here. Number 3, and this is one I think a lot of people are sleeping on, which again seems kind of wild to me. Again, people are just jumping to conclusions. Do you really think that one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the biggest apps in history, if they felt there was a real threat at losing basically their biggest market, that they wouldn't be working with our government to say, what do we need to do so we can stay in the United States? So if both these things I just said before, point 1, point 1.5, and point 2, if those things all just didn't come to fruition, like what I said there didn't work, and it's I was wrong on all those things. If it said, like, there's an actual bill that's been drafted, it's going to hit the floor, and it's really threatening a nationwide ban, do you really think all the executives at TikTok, all the executives at ByteDance wouldn't be in DC speaking with lawmakers and negotiating? They're just going to say, like, yeah, we'll give up America. We're too stubborn. We're not going to change. You guys want to ban us and we lose 300 million, customers. We lose our biggest ad market. Cool. We're going to go in peace. Again, I don't see that. That's not, no business owner would do that, right? What the logical thing to do, which I imagine any owner and executive of a company in that situation would do, is they would go and say, okay, we'll make some concessions. What type of walls do we need to put up? What type of updates do we need to make to the app to reduce tracking? Like, what do we need to do? What's the minimum we can do to make you feel comfortable to let us stay in the United States? So again, I think if the first 3 things I just talked about was wrong in all 3 of them, and it gets to this point where it's actually something's tangible, real bill. Again, could be wrong here, but like, I just don't see how executives at the company would just not try to do anything, wouldn't negotiate. And the government wouldn't be willing to negotiate with that leverage. So those are a few of the reasons why I know this is a hot topic. I know people are very opinionated on this, and rightfully so. Like I said, I agree with a lot of the reasons why people are for this. But I also think we need to take a step back and say, like, how, we're talking about something really massive here. We're talking about a nationwide ban of usually the most popular kind of top 1, top 2, top 3 apps in the world, month after month for the last 2 years. It's a company doing $11 billion a year in ad revenue. Like, that's a big thing. And so to assume that, like, that happens without all the things I just talked about not happening, I think is a little ignorant there. And what I will say is, this is why, like, I know a lot of people have come to me, like, they've said, hey, well, you jump ship from Facebook and you went all on TikTok, and now you're just saying this because you're dependent on TikTok. And the reality is, like, I'm not dependent on anything. I think what I do as a marketer is I look at opportunities. And so 2.5 years ago, TikTok was an opportunity for me, and I got banned from Facebook. I kept running Facebook. And frankly, if you go back and watch my videos, I've always bashed Facebook at a personal level. It's always been like, I don't like Facebook personally because of the way they treat users, the way they banned me and all that stuff. Like, but I've always said, if you watch a lot of my videos, I say Facebook is an app platform. It's still the best. You should still advertise there. We still advertise there. We never stopped advertising there, right? It's still a huge part of our ad budget. So, if this does happen, it's not going to impact me. it's not going to affect my business, right? We advertise all over the place. We have a $500,000 a month recurring revenue political business that we can't even really advertise anywhere. We can't advertise on TikTok. Can we advertise in these places because we're political? So most of our businesses are doing totally different types of advertising. And that's why I'm always testing new channels. That's why I'm testing Rumble and Truth and Twitter and Quora and Hulu and all these things. Cause it's like, hey, this stuff could happen. You could get banned from Facebook. TikTok could get banned. Like anything like this can happen. That's why diversification is so big. So I do think this is probably a good thing though, because it's a wake up call to people that might be really dependent on TikTok. Maybe they create an agency and that agency only does TikTok and all their clients are just TikTok and they have no fallback skills. They're not good at Facebook. They're not good at YouTube. This is a wake up call. I think if that's you, even though I think it's highly unlikely this happens, I still think you should start putting some plans in place. Start getting some contingency plans in place just in case. Again, highly, highly unlikely. And if it became likely, I still think you could get a long window of time. But it doesn't hurt to diversify. So I just want to throw that caveat on the end there because I know I'm going to get comments. I know people are going to share stuff like that where you're only taking TikTok side because of X, Y, and Z. But frankly, again, I'm not taking their side. I agree that it's like especially at a government level, like ban, like justifiable. I don't like just like I don't like Facebook. I've always shared this. You can separate your personal views with your business views. Personally, I don't like Facebook. Personally, I don't really like TikTok. I think they're all bad. I think they're all bad for society. I think they're all, evil, like at a high level. But I also run businesses and I also understand if you're a marketer, like this is where you need to play. And so you can hold two conflicting viewpoints at different levels. So I want to make that really clear there. But again, we're going to wrap here. I'm curious what you think. So do you think TikTok will be banned nationwide or do you think people are going to head themselves? Let me know in the comments below and I'll see you guys in the next video.